For all of our panellists, and I'd like to welcome two more to the stage who are going to join us as we weave together the threads of this afternoon's conversation. It's my pleasure to welcome Hugh Ritchie from Drumpeel Farms in Hawke's Bay, and also Kirit Mucken of NML Produce Limited in South Auckland. Let's give them a round of applause. This is quite an odd place to sit. I might actually stand up so that you're not... Actually, have we got Kirit? Okay. Welcome, Kirit. Come and have a seat. And we have lots of questions coming in via the app, so thank you for your questions. And we will come to the first one, which is our top voted question. It is for you, Bridget. Dinah asks, how does Foodstuff celebrate New Zealand-grown fresh and processed fruit and vegetables over imported equivalents?
Just reminding you to go easy on me. I just got the late call up. With our grower commitment programs, we'll source that supply essentially from that region if possible, and so they can cut it that morning and have it in there that afternoon into our local stores. So it's a great example of using our supply chain effectively, so it's a lower cost to serve, and our customers in those stores know that it's their local produce from their local grower.
Thank you, Bridget. Sandy says, Frank, you presented some great questions that growers need to ask themselves. The key question, though, is how to break the power of the retail duopoly. That requires political will and courage. What steps do you recommend to help bring a freer market to retail and help the grower to capture more of the value? Just a light one to end the day.
Thank you. First of all, I would say there is no easy solution here, and if you're wanting some quick wins, you're not going to get it from pursuing this agenda. Having said that, I'm all for competition, and I think we clearly know that the biggest problem for competition is the Resource Management Act and how it's made it very difficult for competitive firms or even the existing firms to adapt their businesses. But I think the third thing we do need to address, shall I say, the natural monopoly associated with scale. You know, we've heard about the feedback from customers so that the retailers know what's going on. You know, it requires scale to have those kinds of systems. Having said that, there's always work to do in getting codes of conduct and processes right so that they work in all directions.
Hugh, I'm sure you'll have a perspective on this. What have growers been saying to you?
Thanks. Yeah, Frank, I thought in your presentation you actually brought out one word that resonated, and that's transparency. I had a text message yesterday from a grower, $5.95 kilo of mandarins in the supermarket, $2.50 at the pack house. Grower got 70 cents. By the time he paid picking and freight, he was down to 30 cents on a product that cost $1.20 to produce. So we need to understand the transparency in the market. And with all due respect to the retailers, I think you talked in Frank and your thing about the imbalance in who owns the supply chain, and I think you're right. Scale has contributed to that. Commerce Commission allows aggregation of these stores, retailers, and yet they actually prohibit growers coming together to try and get some sort of strength of market position by collectively talking about what is a realistic price. So I think there is a real imbalance in the power and how that retail system works.
So just to give a quick response, that last suggestion that you've made to me is a far more fruitful way than devoting the attention directly on the duopoly.
Absolutely. I don't think breaking the duopoly or doing anything is I think potentially having more supermarkets could add more cost to our food supply system rather than reducing that cost.
So to pick up on that, how do we improve transparency to anyone on the panel?
Well, I think, again, establishment of disclosure of margin would be a very good first step. And that's at all levels, grower levels, distribution centre levels, the retail. And actually, I think in some respects, Bridget talked about the transition from from healthy food to processed and snack food, and that where that's going on. And I bet you the margin on those processed foods are a lot lower than they are on the vegetable, fresh fruit and produce. And I think that needs to be established too, because it's not fair on supermarkets if they take very little margin from some of those big multinational companies' products as well.
Jared, what are your thoughts?
I think there's the transparency is a key one. As past president of the Puko Vegetable Growers Association, a lot of the comments from growers for us was, what can we do? How can we do it? We're producing this, and all our costs are coming to us, increasing, but we can't get the price up. But we see it in the store for this. And I think the first key is the transparency around what the growers are getting, what is it selling for, and there needs to be some parity around sharing of that. Of the value. So that's definitely, and I think I agree with you, the transparency is massive, but also the ability for growers to go, particularly in recent times with the increase in fuel and fertiliser and stuff, to have those conversations with the wholesale markets, with the supermarkets, to say, hey, look, we actually have got increased costs. It's not our fault. It's not our fault. It's hitting us, and we need to get a better return. Otherwise, all we're doing is we're just piling up a whole stack of money on the floor, and we're just putting a match to it, because we're just digging ourselves a bigger hole. So there has to be those sort of discussions had. If you look at transport, straight away there's a FAF that gets put on, and everybody else can seem to put on the extra charges and get paid. Come to the grower level, any primary producer, and it's just stuck.
Frank made the point that we're not good at rewarding producers. To any members of the panel, how can we change that?
Well, I think it comes back to there is a value chain, and I'm not advocating for an increase in the price of food. But if you look at the end value that the consumer, pays at the storefront versus where the spread of that value is then distributed after that point, that's the bit that needs to change. And with all due respect, and times gone by, wastage and out-of-date sort of produce was the cost at the retailer. And now a lot of that is actually shipped back to the producer or the supplier. And so I think that again, $2.50 to $5.95 is a massive jump for just actually putting it on the shelf. And so I think we have to really look at where that share of the total value is going.
I think the most rewarding thing for a grower would be, I'm all for competition. Competition is good for the consumers, but competitions coming to the New Zealand market really need to understand how this market works. How do we sell? How do you buy? How do you sell as a retail or, whole chain, whatever you call it. It will be a reward if you don't ask us as growers to give you a cheap price so you could compete with each other on my own product. That would be the greatest reward, to be honest.
Other ways we can capture more of the value and reward producers better?
I think it's about balance, right? So you've got to balance customer, because we need to bring the customer to the table all the time. You've got to balance those return to suppliers. You've got to balance the investment in stores and communities that we need to make. And we need to also think about having a strong New Zealand-owned business, such as Foodstuffs, at the table, because that's actually good for New Zealand as well.
Bridget, with your Foodstuffs hat on, are you confident that there are no other decisions, changes, tweaks that you could make as an organisation that would ensure a greater share of value could be fairly apportioned to the grower without increasing the price at the checkout?
Look, I think what we're doing around our grower commitment programs shows that we want to collaborate deeply with growers to get the right outcome for customers. And with that comes the responsibility around trying to balance those grower needs as well. And that's what we endeavour to do.
Whatever the motivations, I observe transparency is really helpful. And why is it that people like me spend more time analysing markets in China and in Vietnam? Because I can get the data, which we cannot get here in New Zealand. And so it makes it hard for independent analysts to make comment, whether critical or constructive, about how things are going.
And I was going to say, the supply chain, I mean, it gets commented on a lot, but we're a small population. We're a skinny, narrow country, and for us to be delivering to our stores 6 days a week is a significant supply chain commitment to be able to do it. And our CEO, Chris Quinn, talks about it. It would work really well if we're the size of Japan. We're just missing 130 million people. So, that is a very real constraint and around our costs and how our supply chain works that contributes to what's on the shelf.
Thank you. Sophie says, thank you for your presentations. Professor Frank, you suggested we should move from customer decisions being determined by price to value. Bridget, you said half foodstuffs customers have inflexible budgets and are struggling to buy groceries. Can we really move from focus on price to value when people have such tight budgets?
First of all, we had the observation about the chocolate with the jelly beans, whatever. I observed that consumers make choices all the time, and we shouldn't be pessimistic that just because this is constrained times, there's not opportunities. We need to find ways to penetrate the market in ways that's appealing to consumers. And there's a whole diversity of consumers. I'm not rich by any means, but does anyone in our household really worry about the price of groceries? It's the last of our financial concerns. A quarter of the population, it's a very pressing issue. But the majority, 75%, I don't think it's the issue that some people suggest. Housing and some other things are more important.
I could add something to that from my ice cream experience. I know Julian's in the room, and we were in ice cream together, and during the difficult years of COVID, ice cream expenditure and consumption went up. And similar things happen with wine. Drinking patterns change, but people can drink more during difficult times.
Bridget, our top voted question for you is from Mike, who says most produce sold in New Zealand is not labelled with brand, grower or cultivar, which helps growers to connect with consumers. Can foodstuffs improve this point of sale information, please?
I think most of our produce is actually sold loose, if you like, so it's not branded like that. And we're getting supply from a large number of growers to be able to, put broccoli at front of store or cauliflower or cabbage. So I don't think it's a simple question actually to be able to say we will do that. And I think we actually need to be proud of the fact that most of our produce is sold that way. In the UK, only 15% of produce is sold loose. So we're super sustainable and I would say advanced compared to the rest of the world on that one.
Erin, you started your presentation by talking about all those different factors that growers have to deal with and that sense that we can't control much of that or any of that sometimes. To any members of the panel, how do we give growers a greater sense of agency in all of this?
I would say our grower commitment programs give them a sense of being at the table with us to talk to customers.
Anyone else? The point that I'm making is if you feel powerless, then things seem overwhelmingly difficult at times. And there are a whole bunch of areas where growers don't have the agency or control or voice that they would like. But how can we strengthen that? Or where are the areas where we can take advantage of the power that we do have?
Well, I think one of the areas we've got to be very careful is, Commerce Commission quite regularly will say to horticultural industry meetings and things, this has been specially designed so you don't break the rules around collaboration. So we talk about, committed grower suppliers, but I bet you that'll be done on a one-by-one basis rather than actually getting all the growers together and actually coming up with a pricing point. And that's the bit where I don't think regulation enables the growers to talk from a position of strength. And again, coming back to transparency, I would love to see the costs from the grower to the end user to see where that, and if that's where it is, well, that's where it breaks. But it's interesting that we've now gone to a distribution model, distribution centre model, and so we're seeing produce trucked from Hawke's Bay to Auckland to come back to Hawke's Bay supermarkets. I mean, that's not a very efficient way of doing things.
As we wrap up, I'd like to ask each of you to give one piece of advice to growers, one thing that they can do in their business in the next 12 months that will either help them to capture more value or amplify their voice, or anything that will strengthen their position in this overall conversation. Kerrett, we'll start with you.
Oh, thanks for that, mate. It's a tough one because being a grower, but I think, be in the conversation, be upfront with who you're supplying, and don't be scared to have the tough conversations and say, we can't make it work at the cost. So, and we can only but work together. So if you're feeling the stress, talk to some fellow growers and see what we can do together. Thanks.
Thank you. Hugh?
Look, I'd agree with the work together. I think that's absolutely critical, that growers do have to come together and collaborate in a supply chain way. I think they really have to focus on quality, because as soon as you give anybody the slightest chance to reduce or reject product on price, then you're in trouble. So really focus, and I think quality assurance, grower driven, is critical.
Thanks, Hugh. Erin?
Before thinking of outside of the box, I would really advise you to go back to your team and ask the question, do we have a box? What do our box look like? Is it tall, big, small? Do we even have a box? Try to understand the box first. Try to understand your own organisation, what's going on. Do you understand all the structures first? Do you understand your own culture first? Go have a drink with your staff. Take them down to the bar and go from there, is my sincere advice.
Wonderful. Thank you, Erin. Mike?
I'm going to embrace the cooperative spirit and also say, collaboration to a degree, but short of anti-competitive is a good thing. So especially when we come to export, it is about cooperation and the tide rising under all the boats.
Know your margins, know your margins, know your margins. And when you're on the night shift, think about how Trade and Enterprise New Zealand and the Horticultural Export Authority could be transformed to new generation organisations.
Bridget, lucky last.
Lucky
You'll be
me.
glad that we're on the last question.
Just, reach out, have a chat. We're not scary. We're just humans from the supermarket industry, and we want to work with you. And probably the best anecdote, which I'll leave you with, I took a whole lot of pack and save owners out to Pukekohe, and they met some growers and had a very frank upfront conversation and then chatted and talked about their businesses, really. And then I rang who'd organised it for me on the way back, and he said, God, they're not as big as wankers as I thought they were about the pack and save owners. And that's just human, right? We all just want to work together, so let's have that open conversation.
And everyone on the stage represents ordinary Kiwi businesses and ordinary Kiwi families, and everyone wants a thriving food sector. So let's continue the conversations. Thank you to all for being here, and a special thanks to Bridget from Foodstuffs, being the only retailer on the panel. We do appreciate your time this afternoon. Let's give them all a round of applause.